Found footage has become its own horror subgenre, but these real-life cases are far more disturbing than any piece of fiction. These are VHS tapes found in abandoned homes with disturbing footage. One of the most infamous finds in abandoned homes, or in this case a remote cabin, are what have become known as the Leonard Lake tapes. You can seek them out, but I highly suggest listening to what I'm about to say before doing that. It started with a shoplifting incident. On June 2nd, 1985, a man named Charles N.G. attempted to steal a vise from a San Francisco hardware store, and he fled, leaving his associate Leonard Lake to deal with police. But when officers checked Lake's identification, it belonged to a missing person. And inside his vehicle, they found an illegally silenced weapon. At the station, Lake requested water and swallowed a cyanide pill sewn into his clothing, slipping into a coma. He died 4 days later, but his confession revealed something deeply disturbing. The investigation led 150 miles to a remote cabin in Wilesville, California, where Lake had built a concrete bunker. When police searched the property, they discovered 12 bodies in shallow graves and over 45 pounds of bone fragments. Investigators also found a map leading to barrels containing victims' personal belongings, but the most chilling evidence came after 2 exhausting days of searching. VHS tapes. Officers gathered to watch, and nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to witness. The recordings showed Lake and Charles N.G. with their captives, documenting all the heinous things they did between 1983 and 1985. It's exactly what you're picturing, and worse. NG fled to Canada but was eventually captured, and in 1999 convicted of 11 counts using the videotapes as evidence. Oh boy, how do I get around this next one? The Armin Meiwes case is one I've always found deeply disturbing. Armin lived in a quiet German town. He was a computer repair technician. He looked perfectly normal on the outside, but on the inside, he had a dark obsession that he just couldn't ignore. He spent hours online searching for someone willing to take part in his fantasy. He wanted to consume someone. In early 2001, Meiwes posted messages on internet forums looking for someone who'd actually be willing to go through with it. Most people who answered were just role-playing, but eventually, an engineer from Berlin named Bernd-Jürgen Brandes actually seemed serious. He was willing to die to participate. The 2 men exchanged messages, created a written contract agreeing Brandes understood what would happen, and arranged to meet at Armin's house in March of 2001. When Brandes arrived, they talked, they spent some time together and prepared for what they both knew would be his final night. Brandes drank and took tablets to calm his anxiety, and at his request, Meiwes filmed much of the evening. The tape shows Brandes consenting repeatedly, even as he grew weaker. Later that night, Armin ended Brandes' life and then carefully stored portions of his body in his freezer. For over a year, the crime went unnoticed, until authorities traced Armin through his online posts. When police searched his house in December 2002, they found human remains, bones, and the long, haunting video of the night. He confessed. He was initially convicted of manslaughter in 2004, but after an appeal and retrial in 2006, the video and other evidence led to a life sentence. The video has never been released to the public. It's just far too distressing, and thank God for that, because I gotta research a lot of appalling stuff for this channel, and that's just not a video I'd ever want to come across. In the early 90s, in the suburbs of Ontario, Canada, they were gripped by a level of fear that most people there had never experienced. Young women were vanishing in broad daylight, and the police were coming up empty-handed. Eventually, the investigation zeroed in on Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, a young, attractive couple who lived in a nice pink house in St. Catharines. To the neighbors, they were the Ken and Barbie of the neighborhood. But the reality was, they were some of the most despicable people imaginable. When the police finally moved in to arrest them in 1993, Karla's lawyers immediately went on the offensive, claiming she was just another victim, a woman who'd been controlled and terrified by her husband. She told the story of being forced to participate in his crimes under the threat of her own life. And this little story, it worked. They were so desperate to convict Paul, they offered Karla a deal, 12 years in prison rather than life, if she'd testify against him. It was a deal that would eventually haunt the Canadian justice system forever. During the initial search of the house, the police missed a hidden compartment in a bathroom ceiling. Paul's own lawyer eventually went back to the house and pulled out a cache of 6 VHS tapes that had been tucked away behind a light fixture. These tapes, it changed everything. When the prosecution finally saw the footage, they realized they'd made a terrible mistake. The tapes didn't show a woman acting out of fear. They showed Karla as this completely willing and active participant. In many of the scenes, she was the one taking the lead, totally calm, calculated, even cheerful, while horrific things were happening to the victims, including her own younger sister, Tammy. Because the plea deal was already signed, the court couldn't take it back, and Karla walked free after only a decade. Luckily, Paul is serving a life sentence. He's been denied parole 3 times. The tapes are so disturbing they're kept in a government vault, and even the transcripts are heavily restricted to prevent the public from ever seeing the true extent of what happened in that house. In 2002, a crime reporter in St. Louis opened an envelope. Inside was an anonymous letter bragging about a crime, along with a printout of an Expedia map with a red X marking a spot in West Alton, Missouri. Sure enough, when police checked the coordinates, there was a woman's remains. Police didn't know it at the time, but a man named Maury Travis was the one who'd sent the letter. He was toying with them, making a little game out of his crimes, but he'd made a big mistake. In the early 2000s, when you printed a web page, the URL was often tucked away in the tiny fine print at the bottom of the paper. Police tracked that specific URL back to Expedia's servers and found that the map had been generated by an account registered to Travis. So within days, the cops were swarming his rental house in Ferguson, Missouri. When they got inside, they found a basement that had been turned into a torment room. Travis had built a literal dungeon. And then they found the VHS tapes. Travis would set up his camcorder on a tripod and film himself carrying out his horrific acts. The footage was so graphic, a lot of the officers had to get counseling afterward. But the tapes linked Travis to at least 12 different victims. Because Travis ended his own life in his jail cell shortly after being caught, these tapes became his confession. And here's a freaky story too. Years later, a new tenant moved in and realized while watching a documentary on TV that she was sitting in the same basement she was looking at in the crime scene photos in the doc. Yeah, the house has since been torn down. Reddit user I Don't Use Anime Avatars was exploring an abandoned church in North Carolina when he came across some very cryptic footage. He wrote, "Hi there, my hobby is finding self-recorded VHS tapes and preserving the good stuff I find on them, if I can find any. This one was very odd. Actually creeped me the F out while I was watching it, like I'd stumbled upon something occult. But the story is true. I found this tape covered in dust in the basement of an abandoned church, untouched for years by anything other than damp air. The tape's only text to identify it was the word youth drawn on the label in pencil. It's a strange video, no doubt. Armed guys, dressed in camo, carry out what looks like a staged scene. There's this, which just makes me uncomfortable. It may just be an intentionally unsettling art project, but if the part about it being found in an abandoned church is true, it's definitely spooky." Mark Twitchell, born in Edmonton, Alberta in 1979, was an aspiring filmmaker. He spent years pursuing the goal, but by the late 2000s, his career hadn't taken off. His marriage was also falling apart, and people around him noticed he'd become increasingly withdrawn. In 2008, Twitchell rented a detached garage in South Edmonton. He told everybody it was a filming space. Inside, he installed plastic sheeting. Cameras were set up to record the interior. Around the same time, Twitchell created fake profiles on the dating site Plenty of Fish, posing as a woman. In October 2008, he contacted 38-year-old John Brian Altinger and arranged a meeting at the garage. Altinger was never seen again. After he went missing, messages were sent from his email claiming he'd suddenly left for Costa Rica. Those messages were, of course, written by Twitchell, who also broke into Altinger's apartment to make it appear like he'd packed up and left. But Altinger had told his friends where he was going initially, so police went to investigate, and they found all the evidence they needed. Police found recordings of the incident and later a deleted document titled SK Confessions. Written in first person, it detailed the plans to lure men using online dating profiles, described failed attempts, and then described the one that worked. At trial, Twitchell claimed it was all fiction, part of a movie he was making, but the jury disagreed. In 2011, he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Before Luka Magnotta became internationally known, he was a failed model, obsessed with becoming an internet celebrity. In 2012, that desperation turned into a nightmare in Montreal. Most people know about the horrific video he uploaded to the web, but the most disturbing footage was actually found in a pile of garbage. A janitor investigating a foul smell in a back alley discovered a suitcase containing remains but tossed in the trash bags nearby were Magnotta's cameras and memory sticks. When police recovered the deleted files, they found hours of raw, unedited footage that was far more graphic than the version shared online. The most chilling find was a rehearsal video featuring a different unidentified man filmed days before the crime. It proved Magnotta had been filming practice runs, treating the entire act like a movie production. Investigators described the files as some of the most haunting digital evidence they'd ever handled. Magnotta was eventually caught in Berlin while reading news articles about himself in an internet cafe. He's currently serving a life sentence, and those raw files remain under strict seal in a police evidence locker. And that has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next one.